Good afternoon and welcome to KAUST Facebook Live. My name is Michelle Ponto. I am in the Communications Department here at the university. And joining me today we have two guests. My first guest is Professor Hanno Wuerbel from the University of Berne, where he is Professor of Animal Welfare. And also joining me today is Professor Valerio Orlando, who is a Professor of Bioscience here at KAUST. Thank you two for joining me today.
Welcome.
I know today was, this week for the last 2 days, we've had a special conference here at KAUST on animal welfare, the 3 R's of animal welfare. Professor Wuerbel, can you tell me why are conferences like these on animal welfare so important, especially at a university like KAUST where we do a lot of research?
Well, the use of animals in research is still hugely important, I think, throughout science. I mean, if you look back in the history of science, we've learned so much from using animals in science, and we still learn a lot. At the same time, of course, there are ethical obligations, so the public is increasingly critical against, using animals, especially if it's about invasive procedures, if there is harm or suffering involved. So it's a delicate balance between, using animals for our purposes and at the same time taking care for the animals. And this needs a lot of education. It's important that scientists are aware of what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they can do justice to both sides, to scientific quality or the quality of science, as well as the welfare of the animals. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we were trying to do over the last 2 days.
Okay. What was your involvement in the conference? Did you chair it?
Actually, I'm the chair of the KAUST Animal Care Committee, and so I participated in the designing the concept and the organization of this important event together with my colleagues of the committee and the institutional officer of KAUST. It's been for us a first time. And the first time in which certain subjects have been openly discussed with our community, and we were so glad to have a distinguished guest that accepted the invitation and definitely contributed enormously to a discussion which is involving not only us, but as Professor Hanno mentioned, anywhere else in the world. Now, it's important for KAUST be there in the kingdom to open this discussion, because this is something that in the kingdom is also important, as this topic is probably in infancy. But we heard the opening key lecture by Professor Asidi from King Faisal Hospital about their experience and the importance of that context in promulgating the right awareness and concept of animal research serving multiple purposes, for example, for sure the biomedical aspects, but more in general also what is the relationship between us, which we consider ourselves to be a superior species in a way together with others, but and the animals in general. This, I think, brought about a number of arguments new, and Professor Hanno was recognizing the importance of students' participation in this event, which has been very lively, very impressive for all of us, and so rewarding.
Okay. How was the students' reactions to the events? Because everyone here at KAUST, they are studying science. What impressed you or what surprised you with their responses?
Well, I was really very impressed by the active contribution by the students. Often when you have a mixed audience with a lot of senior scientists in there, then often students shy a bit away from asking questions or from engaging in open discussion, and that was completely different yesterday. So I think it was even students who started the discussion yesterday who came up with interesting questions. And also, besides the program, I had a lot of exchange with students who came up to me and wanted to know more, and so that was really a very positive experience for me.
Okay. Fully agree. I mean, this is from the very beginning, we were surprised ourselves. There was an atmosphere created, as Professor Hanno underlined, the diversity of contributions and topics, and also difficulty of the topics were not necessarily an easy start for as I said, diverse audience and so on. But in fact, the feedback was immediate and very productive.
That's good. Why did you have the conference now at KAUST? I know that we have been talking about having animal labs for a while. Why now? What has changed?
Nothing has changed. Nothing. Actually, things are happening here, in the sense that animal facilities are now in place, are evolving, developing, supporting the science, and opening also collaborations outside KAUST, and favoring the implementation here also of other type of activities in terms of economic development and other activities. So dedicated professionals and dedicated committees now have the duty to support these activities, and we thought this was about time to set up such an event as a first event where all these topics were put on the table and involve the community and the people involved in these activities, and get started from there.
You mentioned a little bit that the conference didn't just involve you from Berne, but it also involved other people, other areas from the kingdom, other universities, other hospitals. How was their reaction? How did they contribute to the conversation?
Well, it's been Professor Asiri from King Faisal Hospital is a prominent personality in the kingdom, and basically one of the leaders in animal related research. So for us, it was a privilege to have him also primarily as a scientist, because he's a person doing cutting-edge science in this respect. And we all appreciated his talk, because his talk was very inspirational also from the philosophical point of view, and directed to solicitate awareness about the importance of discussing these topics in general with the general public, and creating an awareness not only among the operators but also the outside public that will be the endpoint beneficiary of such activities.
That's interesting. Professor Wuerbel, tell me a little bit about the role animal welfare plays in research in terms of ethics and humane uses.
Well, I mean, animal welfare is like one aspect of it. I think if we're talking about humane science, humane animal research, then we're essentially talking about two things. One is the animal side, so you want to make sure that animals aren't used unnecessarily, that you're using the least number of animals that you can use for achieving a certain for addressing a certain question or achieving a certain knowledge. And you want to use the least harmful procedures in order to make sure that you do not impose harm unnecessarily on animals. And this is the 3 R's concept that was basically the topic of the meeting, to meet these 3 aspects: alternative methods if possible, minimal number of animals as far as possible, and the least harmful procedures. And the great thing about this concept of the 3 R's is that I think, even though there are, around the world there are cultural differences, there are economic differences, but I think this is a concept that unites all different cultures and all different areas, because it's so obvious to everybody that it's a useful concept to apply. Nobody seems to be against using these principles. They're almost universally accepted. And so this is one side, of course, and the other side, because animal research is done for producing science. And of course, the other aspect that is important for humane science is that the science makes sense. So the science needs to be valid and robust. The methods need to be such that the expected benefit can be achieved. Because, no matter how few animals you use or how little harm you impose on animals, if the science isn't solid, then you're wasting animals for no good reasons. And so it's always important to me to emphasize these 2 aspects, which have to go hand in hand: good science and good welfare, and that is for me the key to humane animal research.
Okay. How did you get into this role?
Well, I'm a biologist by training. I studied biology and then specialized in animal behavior. And I think when you're doing animal behavior, you're sensitive to, how the environment impacts on animals. So you're already close to questions that are addressed in animal welfare science, because you know how important environmental conditions are for whether animals are faring well or not. And then I had the opportunity in Switzerland to lead a large survey across the entire Switzerland in industry and academia to look for the first time into how laboratory animals are actually kept and cared for. Because previously public attention in terms of animal research was mostly focused on the procedures that are being done with these animals in the experiments, while there was much less attention to the conditions under which these animals normally live. And of course, most of the time the animals spend in their enclosures, in their cages. And so if the conditions under which they're living aren't okay, then that can have a major impact on their welfare. And that actually got me started, because I found this area of science so fascinating, because it brings together lots of different scientific disciplines and integrates them with ethical questions and philosophical questions. And I just thought that is the thing that I want to do.
That's true. It's a very passionate subject for many people, whether they're in science or they're not. It does stir up.
It's also, I mean, of course, it's also, animal welfare is an emotional issue, and so it's also one of my focuses to bring rationality into this discussion. Of course, it will always be emotional, but I see my role in producing knowledge, objective knowledge, that can then be used by the different stakeholders to negotiate on the basis of rational arguments rather than just emotional feelings.
You mentioned awareness is very important, and obviously this conference, the awareness was more geared towards those who are attending who are already in the science field. How about awareness to the rest, the general public, like people like me who don't know what's going on in the lab and get these preconceived notions of what's out there in the media?
I think public outreach is extremely important, and in particular in fields like this, where you're touching on subjects that matter to the public. Nobody is cool about animal welfare and how we treat animals, how we interact with animals. And so I think it's extremely important for scientists also to do public outreach and to explain to the public what they're doing and why they are doing. And this is also why I think it's so important that we really do the best we can to do both good science and good welfare, because if you have things to hide, or if the quality isn't good enough, then of course you raise questions in the public, and that makes it difficult. So I think it's an obligation for scientists to take it seriously, and I think most scientists are doing this and are trying hard to do this. There are still issues that need to be improved. That was also discussed at the meeting. I think we openly discussed also areas where there are problems, where improvement is needed, but I think that is what is needed to bring the subject forward and to get to a state where you can talk to the public and don't have to have bad feelings about it.
But I think, if I may add comment on that, I think it's a two-way process. It's not that it's a one-way process, that we have the scientists here who know everything and have to justify whatever they do and convince, in a way, the public out there that what they do is valuable. But in this dialogue, I think also scientists learn from the general public what is valuable and what is not. Or we build together values, in a way, in doing research and improving knowledge, in using all the tools and all the concepts that drive our research efforts and so on. So in biomedicine, in any other area is clearly of common interest, in a way. So the use of animals along history, the relationship with animals, in different cultures and different times, and so has also evolved. It's not something that has been always the same, and so on. And this is the way, from the cultural point of view, any aspect of culture, including the religion, philosophical aspects, and so on. These are principles that we share, we practice, we talk about, and we discuss openly. I think this is a mutual process. The other way around, that having scientists hidden somewhere doing secret things and potentially dangerous and exploiting other creatures' life for their own careers or for the wrong purposes, I think this would be the wrong culture that has to be actively counteracted, and that's what we do, and that on a daily basis.
Okay. So the conference, I know it talked about the 3 R's, and I'm sure it talked about some of the best practices. What other kinds of discussions were brought up during the conversations?
For example, if there are alternatives, so to animal experimentation, there are technologies now that do not necessarily use the entire animal, but can create from a specialized group of cells, for example, what are called organoids or reprogrammed somatic cells and so on, material that can be extremely useful, and it's been proven to be extremely useful, for example, to model genetic diseases or being used for drug screenings involved in a number of pathologies and so on. So that's something that's been also addressed and openly discussed.
That's interesting. I know with KAUST we pride ourselves on always being the leaders in certain areas. When we started our animal testing here, what kind of processes did we go through? Did we consult with people like Professor Hanno to find out the best practices, or did it come from different types of consultations and discussions?
The committee itself that I chair has started its activities based on internationally recognized institutions and practice, which are codified basically in publications and so on. So this is our mode of conduct that we apply, but we don't apply it, let's say, in simple terms. We don't simply transfer rules. We try to convey a pragmatic vision of these rules, to apply it in a fair way, in a reasonable way, adapted to the local needs, and not to make things necessarily complicated, but practical, and in a way easy to use and fair. But this is under the control of several aspects of our activities, which is safety, which is security in terms of infrastructure functioning, and education of students, all the operators that have to deal with this type of activities, that have to learn. They have to undergo a number of courses and develop a certain level of skill and awareness before they can operate at all.
Okay, that leads me to the next question. I was curious about what the committee does and their role.
The committee duty is not, we're not policemen. We're here, it's the other way around. We are here to support the science. And so to help the researchers, those who are more experienced or less experienced or whatever, to adapt to the local conditions, and help them to write, for example, the best practice in a grant application, calculating the necessary number of mice, for example, or fish, how to organize the experiment, how to optimize basically the activities based on the general principle that were the argument of the conference.
Okay. Is there any special conditions about animal welfare because of the region that we're in, or is it the same all over the world?
Well, I don't see major differences in the sense we all here very reasonable and experienced scientists and other professionals that support this type of activities. We have also the support of internationally recognized and top-level organizations that help in the infrastructure, help the other support like veterinaries or others. So I think we basically stick to the criteria that we think are mandatory in order to stick to the general principles of dealing with animal research. Below that, threshold, I think we would not allow even activities at all.
Okay.
No, I mean the principles of animal research or of science in general, they are fairly universal. So you may have particular applications here in terms of the species that people are working with, or in terms of the applied questions that you address, but in terms of implementing the science and the guidelines according to which the science should be conducted, that is following fairly universal principles.
Shared values, and from the ethical, operational, any level, it's these are the standards.
Okay. Now that this conference is over, what is the next steps? Will there be another conference? How will these conversations be continued with the students? You said that everyone was very excited. They had a lot of questions. Discussions were made. What's next?
Well, I think it. What happened is that I mean, first of all, the participation in the conference was quite enthusiastic, and also from the number of people who participated at all levels. This, I think, created more awareness and commitment from everybody here to work in the direction of having everything functional, fully functional. Because we have to be honest and say we are at the very beginning of a number of activities that have a long-term projection and certain ambitions, and this needs support at all levels, investments and dedication and professionals and so on. I think this very first event probably created the right atmosphere to create an atmosphere of mutual trust and commitment to make things better. Also because we heard the experience of people who were experienced in the past. Analogous problems as we are being experiencing right now here is not a one-day process to set up an aquarium. And I think it was great experience hearing from people who helped, for example, the aquarium in Jeddah, having from the researcher point of view, one fish in a tank or a group of fish in a tank is a very easy exercise, whereas recreating an ecosystem, a real ecosystem with hundreds of species in an aquarium gives you the idea of the complexity of such an operation. So transfer this kind of ability to deal with complex problems and integrate this with other type of technologies, genomics or other things like this, is a challenge. But I think this is the right direction.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I hope that this will continue, and I think this was a great start. And as you said previously, you don't want to be a police. You want to create a culture of mutual trust, where people help each other. And I think these are events that are hugely important for that, where you can bring people together who have common interests but partially different questions, and you can discuss these questions in an open atmosphere. And I'd be happy to contribute in the future if there are more of such events happening here.
Privilege for us.
Well, it certainly sounds like it was an excellent event, and that the doors of conversation are open. So I'm glad that more conversations are going to happen in the future. Well, we're almost out of time. Do you guys have any last statements about the conference?
Well, the last statement, I think we should go to the guests that came here for the first time and got an impression of what's going on here.
As I say, I was impressed by two things. One was the student contribution, which we talked about before, and the other was to witness, how fast and how far KAUST got within this relatively short time of its existence. I mean, the progress is huge here, and maybe it is an advantage that you don't have these, the long tradition, which can also hamper progress in some ways, because people have their hardened views on how things should be. And here you feel a lot of enthusiasm. People want to achieve, want to develop this institution quickly, and so this is an excellent situation for actually implementing new standards, because you feel that people want to get there, and so this is also a nice experience for me when you feel that people are interested in what you're doing and not resistant to new ideas.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's a great conversation, and I'm glad that the conference went really well for you. Hope you can come back and visit us again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. And join us again on Facebook Live next time we're on. Thank you. Bye.